Hey, good afternoon, United Methodist men, or good evening, time of the day or morning you're watching this. My name is Odell Horn. I am the Director of Communication for the North Georgia Conference, United Methodist Men. And I want to welcome you to this conversation I'm going to have with Chris Karabinos, who is the Director of Scouting Ministry for the North Georgia Conference, United Methodist Men. I had the opportunity to meet Chris several years ago. I want him to formally introduce himself, but Chris has developed a wonderful strategic organization and scouting ministries for the North Georgia Conference United Methodist Men, and it has been an example of scouting ministry throughout the United Methodist Men. Chris, welcome to this conversation.
Thank you very much, Odell. Thank you, Odell, for that very nice introduction. I appreciate joining you here today for a conversation, particularly about scouting as a ministry within the United Methodist Church. I have been a scout leader since 1996, so 26, 27 years. I'm an Eagle Scout myself growing up, and so I sort of come by. My brothers were all Eagles, and my dad was involved in the program. My wife, she earned the First Class Award, which is the Eagle Scout equivalent back in the day. And then both our sons are Eagle Scouts, so we're very much a scouting family. I didn't grow up Methodist, I grew up Catholic, ended up converting to Methodism a couple decades ago. And I was actually scouting at a Methodist church up in Johns Creek, Georgia for 12 years before we even joined the church, before I joined the church. So definitely Methodism is my spiritual home as well as my scout home these days. Professionally, I work in technology. I work for a custom software development firm based out of Alpharetta. And my key role today is as conference scouting coordinator for the North Georgia Conference. So we have one of the largest scout teams. We definitely have the largest scouting ministry in all of Methodism worldwide here in North Georgia. So we've got like 22,000 scouts. So very active program, even during COVID times. We're still very active, but so that's a high level introduction.
Okay. Thank you, Chris, for that. Now, I want you to tell me about why scouting is important to the United Methodist Men, United Methodist Church Society, just however you want to direct that answer. Tell me what the importance of scouting as a ministry is.
Actually, thank you for that question, Odell. Scouting is one of three major programs that the United Methodist Church endorses and sponsors as a youth program. The Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts of America, and Big Brothers Big Sisters. We also promote Campfire, but here in North Georgia, we only have the first three. Scouting is a great program to to identify and serve youth within, say, 5 miles of a church's campus. A lot of us get into it. I got into it because I wanted to get into it for my sons. And I found out fairly quickly that most of the kids in the troop were not even at that church. They were actually in some other church, and 50% of the cases in no church at all. 50% of all kids who are in scouting program don't go to church, synagogue, temple, anywhere. So one of the reasons why the Methodist Church has adopted scouting as a program, it's a great way to reach kids outside of our immediate church, but also outside of our faith. And so it's a great way to sprinkle seeds of Christ, as I like to say, in front of scouts and their families. So we get them on campus for a scout meeting, take them on a camp out. They get to hear a prayer over a meal. They maybe have a Scout Sunday service in February. So they get exposed in a pretty easy way to faith. And then many of them will start asking questions. And then also that fosters conversation. So it actually puts scouts and their families on a faith walk. And so I think scouting is very important in helping introduce faith to a lot of families. And the church looks at it this way as more of an evangelical sort of outreach into the community.
Thank you for that, Chris. Then, yeah, and you sort of addressed my next question, and you can expound upon it if you choose to. Is scouting, the importance of scouting as a ministry of the church? You already stated that it's reaching folks who are kids who are in the community within a 5-mile radius of the church that are unchurched. technically.
No, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. And the same thing goes with the Girl Scouts too. And so, in fact, and this is interesting. So 95% of all the youth don't go to our church or synagogue. 50% go nowhere. 5% go to our own church or synagogue. So we have an opportunity to reach a lot of youth that way. And it turns out that the Boy Scouts have done a 100-year research project on that 3% of all scouts actually go into the ministry. That's amazing. So a lot of scouts they take merit badges to learn about astronomy or engineering or computers or something, and they actually pick an avocation, a trade later to go into. Ministry is one of those things. So they get exposed to it. So it's a great way to introduce faith. In fact, with the United Methodist Committee on Scouting in North Georgia, we have 22 people on the committee. 4 of them are ministers, a female minister and 3 male ministers. 2 of those are Eagle Scouts. So, and one of them, Reverend Scott Pickering, will tell you he came across faith through scouting. So he's one of the 3%. So, and then also we have other programs as well. One is called Pray. That's a nonprofit. It's called Pray, based up in St. Louis, Missouri. They put together content for kids K through 12th grade to help get them into scripture very gingerly, but also work through projects, little craft projects at younger, service projects when they get older. When you get into middle school and high school, it's like a confirmation. It's like 8 months of pretty intensive stuff. So it's a great way to get kids in the Bible and and actually the parents, because their parents get to go along with them too, if they like. And so it's a great way for ministers to actually reach out and talk to families on these topics, which is near and dear to them. So hopefully that answered your question.
Yes, it did. Thank you. Tell me about the partnerships that you have with the Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts of America.
Yes. So the Girl Scouts have faith in their program too. Duty to God is a core component of the Girl Scouts, the Girl Scout oath. And so they put on programs. They also use the Pray program, just like the Boy Scouts, the Girl Scouts, and other youth programs. But they also have some additional programs that are specific to Girl Scouts that they utilize to help plant seeds of faith. Now, neither the Boy Scouts or the Girl Scouts tell families how to believe. If you're Methodist, study Methodism. If you're Catholic, Catholicism. If you're Jewish, Judaism. So we don't try to convert anybody, but every scout should believe in something. So you check with your parents, and so the Girl Scouts sort of follow that same tradition too. So they have lots of patches and badges, just like the Boy Scouts, and encouraging youth, girls in particular, to follow that path. Within the United Methodist Church, the General Commission on United Methodist Men, or the UMM, they have begun responsibility for managing both of those programs, as well as Big Brothers Big Sisters and Campfire nationwide. And so they needed an agency to sort of caretake for all the youth programs. Since the Boy Scouts is the predominant program, the United Methodist Men has been tasked with caretaking those programs. So they nurture those relationships at the national level. They also conduct training at the national level for Methodist Scouters, Girl Scouts and Boy Scout leaders. And we have national training virtually throughout the year. We also have it at Philmont, which is the major Scouts reservation out in New Mexico. So in fact, we typically here in North Georgia, we'll take 8 to 10 people every year to that training, which is sort of a mountaintop experience. And so we encourage people to go out there, because you really learn how to use scouting as a ministry tool. So, but Girl Scouts is an important part of that. Traditionally, even though it's been part of it, sometimes we'll go through seasons where we don't have any Girl Scout leaders on the committee, and so we forget to talk about it, or we forget how to talk about it. So we made a big push the last couple of years to make sure we have strong Girl Scout leaders, and so we've made some great strides on that the last few years. And Girl Scout membership, actually, with pre-COVID, it was growing dramatically, and and so they were realizing that, especially in North Georgia, Methodist churches really wanted Girl Scouts to meet on campus, because we want to open our arms. And that maybe wasn't necessarily communicated before. So we started aggressively communicating that about 4 or 5 years ago, got the word out to the Girl Scout professionals, who got it out to the new troops that were forming. So we've had a lot of new Girl Scout troops form. We have over 400 Girl Scout troops meeting on Methodist campuses in North Georgia today. So that's amazing.
Okay. Thank you for that. Now talk to me about just the growth of the scouting ministries. First of all, tell me, when did you become the scouting coordinator for the district, for the North Georgia Conference? And talk to me about the growth and the organization. You talked a little bit about the growth of the girls. Talk to me about the whole structure of scouting ministry in North Georgia, the scouting in North
Perfect.
Georgia.
So the first question is, I assume responsibility as conference scouting coordinator for North Georgia in 2015. And so we built a committee. We had just a couple of folks working. We began to recruit a lot of folks. We now have 22, as I mentioned, and in different districts within the conference, and also people who do training. And we have a ministerial team, if you will, as I mentioned before, they're sort of resources for the rest of the folks. And so we have a really nice structure there. And our team's mission is to help start new packs and troops and crews, new units, as we call them, and also new pray programs. So we want churches to first have scouting, and then secondarily, we want them to actually lead a pray program once a year or every other year at least. We had a lot of success growing the 2 years prior to COVID. In fact, I had just completed a troop inventory, a scouting inventory from the North Georgia Conference in December, right before Christmas, 4 months before COVID hit, or 3 months before COVID hit. And so at that time, we had about 22,000 youth. In fact, I happen to have let me share a slide here if I could, that I shared at a recent presentation. And can you see that there? Okay, so what this shows in North Georgia, we have about almost 22,000 scouts. This is December before COVID hit. About 4,600 of the Girl Scouts and about a little over 17,000 Boy Scouts. And so you can see the 400 units, 400 Girl Scout troops, about 550-ish, if you will, for Boy Scouts. And so, and you can see the number of churches that we had for each of these programs. It's interesting that about 149, as you see here, churches had both Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts. So it's not an either or decision. It's an either and decision. We want them to do both, actually. And that's what our recommendation is. But if you look at all 316 churches at the time, that's 39% of all the 800 churches we had in the conference at that time. That's about double the national average. So scouting is very active here in North Georgia. And as you see here, this 10% number, so the 2 years prior, because I do this inventory every 2 years, we had grown about 10% at that time. A lot of that was strong Girl Scout growth. Then also the Boy Scouts were growing too for different reasons. So, and that was counter to the national trend with Boy Scouts that are sort of drifting downwards, as well as Methodism. You know, Methodism has sort of been drifting sideways or downwards in some conferences. So even though we had those two trends, we were actually growing it here because of one, we increased the costs. The Girl Scouts got active. The Boy Scouts started accepting girl troops, starting girl-specific troops. And so that was a driver of growth. And then also in 2018, Bishop Sue Harper Johnson here in the North Georgia Conference, she agreed to host a Bishop Scout lunch. And so if I could just show this right here, if you look at it, there's Bishop Sue, myself, and this is one of the 4 ministers on the team. So he spoke about how scouting is evangelism. You're reaching out to kids, you know, and families in the community. And so Bishop Sue spoke about her Girl Scout experience growing up in Florida. And she actually encouraged ministers to go ahead and if they weren't starting a pack or troop or Girl Scout troop, go ahead and start one. She said, you ought to be doing scouting in some form. And then also you ought to be doing the pray program if you're not doing that. So 12 months after this Bishop Scout lunch in April of 2018, we started 45 new units, Girl Scout and Boy Scout units. We also started 25 new pray programs. So the bishop's voice helps. And so she is one of the most pro-scouting bishops in all of Methodism, and we're just so fortunate to have her here. So in fact, 2 years later, after we saw those results, I presented her with the Torch Award. It's a Methodist Scouting Award, one of the top Methodist Scouting Awards available because of her impact on scouting here. So that's another reason why we were growing so much leading up to COVID.
Okay, Chris, thank you for that COVID, how did you do ministry then when COVID hit in March of 2020?
So that's interesting. So a lot of packs and troops actually folded because they, most people didn't know about Zoom or even how to use it, or intimidated by it, or don't have good computers. Some of them actually thrived. Some were actually technologists and people who embraced it, and they actually had meetings. My old troop up in Johns Creek, it was having troop meetings virtually. A lot of Cub Scout packs, the smaller ones, were having it. The Girl Scouts didn't hardly impact them at all because they only had 10 or 12 girls in most troops. Some are bigger, but the average one's about 12, the average size. And it's a lot easier to get 12 girls on a Zoom screen and actually have some conversation and do something productive. It's a lot harder to have 80 Cub Scouts on a screen with all the parents. That's just mayhem. So they may have den meetings instead of pack meetings anyway. So, it's hard to go camping. So the first 12 months of COVID, it was a huge impact, negative impact for some, but actually thrived for others, depending on the leaders, frankly, if they adopted it or not. In addition, we do some training in the UMCOS. One of the things that we do is a Scouters Religious Academy. And so we had one scheduled in April. COVID shut the world down as we knew it in March of 2020. And we had the Scouters Academy scheduled at Peachtree Road in late April. And so we obviously couldn't do it. We made the decision a week into it to go ahead and just try Zoom. A couple of us had experience with it. We said, we don't know if everybody's going to show up. We actually put 6 hours of course on Zoom from 8:30 to 3:30 in the afternoon. Guess what? Instead of 60 people, we had 400. And 90% stayed for the entire 6 hours. Can you imagine that? People were hungry and thirsty for the content. They want to know. And what's interesting, instead of just Georgia, maybe a surrounding state or two, we had 40 states participate, 6 countries. We had kids from Alaska and Hawaii, 5 hours behind us, and kids in Austria and Germany and Italy. It's amazing. So 3:30 in the morning in Alaska, and they were up to like 10 o'clock at night in Europe. So that told us there's actually a thirst for this content. And so we did it again last year, and we had similar numbers last year. So it's fascinating. So we did a lot of things virtually. We're doing pray programs virtually. You got to limit the class size, got to make sure the parents are in the room and this kind of stuff. Practice your 2 deep leadership, even online, this kind of stuff. So, but some people embraced it and figured out ways and thrived. So it was a hit or miss. And now in the last, call it 9 to 12 months since last fall, we're meeting in person again. We're going back on campouts. So we're able to actually conduct scouting as we've known it before.
Okay, let me do this, Chris. I want to shift because you mentioned 2 deep leadership. I want you to explain what that is, and then I want you to explain about the Boy Scouts lawsuit.
Sure, and one definitely relates to the other. So 2 deep leadership is one of the policies that the Boy Scouts enacted in the 80s. So the Boy Scouts knew that they had an issue back in the 50s and 60s and 70s with pedophiles. And they put together a lot of procedures in order to keep them out. I mean, so did churches, so did schools. That's also a problem in some people's homes. So that's just a problem worldwide, and definitely in the United States society. So in the 80s, the Boy Scouts started enacting some policies. 2 deep leadership is one of the key ones. That means that I can't be alone one-on-one with a child anymore, ever. On a camp out, in a troop meeting, I can't go to the kid's home. The kid can't come to my home. Back when I was a scout, when I took my tenderfoot rank advancement, I went to the Scoutmaster's home. It was one-on-one. Okay, and I passed it and I left. You cannot do that today. And so they enacted that. They also enacted other policies such as we're not going to have an 11-year-old tent with a 17-year-old, first year with a high school senior. That's just a recipe for problems. So there's all kinds of policies like that. We also required adult leaders and parents to go through training, like an hour-and-a-half training. And then also we put the kids through training. We had Boy Scouts prepared videos, professionally well done videos. And we would actually present those in a pack meeting, and then the parents would drive home, they have conversations. So we wanted to sensitize the parents and the youth about what roles, responsibilities were, that you couldn't do certain things, that kind of thing. Because a first grader doesn't know that they shouldn't go off when they're adults. The adults should. Anyway, so the Boy Scouts started in the 80s, the 90s. They started background checks around 2000, 2001. They've done a number of other things and built a whole process around it. So that today, scouting is, statistically speaking, the safest place to have your kid. It's safer than the church, it's safer than school, it's safer than homes, it's safer than the park, it's safer than any, because the Boy Scouts have put so much effort around it and so many safeguards. In fact, when the Methodist Church created or enhanced this safe sanctuary training in the early 2000s, they looked to the Boy Scouts, and they started with the Boy Scout Youth Protection Training Program and then enhanced it. And they added youth for babies, and they also added protection for older, 70 and 80-year-old people inside churches and home visitations, that kind of stuff. So they had additional use cases to what the Boy Scouts had, but that's where they started. And the Catholics have copied it. The Girl Scouts have borrowed it. And a lot of other youth organizations have started with the Boy Scout programs. It's considered the gold standard in youth protection and across all these. So the Boy Scouts knew they had a problem. There is a lawsuit that's going on right now. You may have seen something in 2020. It's a class action lawsuit. It closed to people wanting to join the lawsuit in November of 2020. It's being litigated now. It's been presented before a judge, a bankruptcy judge, and she's been going through it for about a year, actually. And so there's a lot of parties to the lawsuit. You have the plaintiffs. There's about 82,000 organized in a couple of dozen different groups. Then you have the insurance companies, you have the BSA, and you have the charter organizations like the Methodist Church, the Catholic Church, the Rotary Club. They have agreed upon a settlement of about $2.7 billion. That number may change a little bit as they finalize this thing. And so the insurance companies are putting in about a third. The BSA and its councils are putting in about a third. And there's other groups that are putting in, for example, the Methodist Church, the Catholic Church, the LDS, and other sponsoring organizations or chartering organizations. They've contributed a significant amount. And so hopefully that is going to be, the judge is going to make a final decision this summer, or maybe early fall of 2022. It will be appealed. One side or the other is going to appeal it. So the judge is taking careful steps to make sure that the decision is not overturned. So she's being very thoughtful and careful about that. And then hopefully that'll be resolved later. And so the Methodist Church, the Boy Scouts in particular, all the groups are wanting to make sure that the people who were abused many, many decades ago are taken care of to the extent that we can at this point without bankrupting the Boy Scouts. So there's a fine line there. And so there's 82,000 plaintiffs will receive the $2.7 billion at some point. I don't know what the payout is because, again, the bankruptcy settlement continues to evolve. One of the things that has been impacted by that is the agreements between the charter organizations like the Methodist Church and the BSA, because we want to make sure that we're protected going forward. And so right now, Methodist Church and all the charter organizations are being sued because it's perceived that we let pedophiles in, even though there's some policies, procedures with that. Now, by the way, most of these 82,000 happened in the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, some in the 70s. Since 1980, very few have happened. There have been some, but very few. In the Methodist Church, we've had 5,200 out of those 82,000, so about 6%. Even though throughout that time, the first 100 years of scouting, we had 22% of the youth, we've only got 6% of the cases. So that's actually a testament to how the Methodism has been running it. We've only had 40 cases since the year 2000. We've only had 3 since the year 2010. So I think the Boy Scouts and all the charter organizations have really got their hands around it. So that's when I say statistically, scouting is one of the safest places, or the safest place you can have your kids today. That's what I'm talking about. Okay. So I'm back to the agreement. So the Methodist Church is working very actively with the Boy Scouts and trying to create a future agreement, a charter agreement or an affiliation agreement. There's a couple different versions that are available out there, and we have provided direction. Bishop Sue and I've written a couple of letters this summer, providing guidance and direction to the churches and scout units in North Georgia, providing, and that's on the North Georgia Conference website if you're looking for that information. And then you can and find out we have actually 4 different available options for churches, and it depends on your insurance and the relationship you want to have with your church, and depends on your BSA council, because they may or may not provide all those options. So we're trying to provide a lot of options so all the churches in our conference can have something to renew and continue scouting with. So I probably gave you a little more that you wanted to, but I wrapped a couple of other things in there.
No, Chris, that is great, because it gives the full picture of the story as we wait his final decision on the settlement. Talk to you about the needs they have right now for scouting ministry.
Thank you for that invitation. Yes, couple of things. Number one, if a minister or a church is interested in starting a pack or troop, Boy Scout or Girl Scout, we'd like to encourage you to do that. And we'd like to offer the UMCOS, Methodist Karabinos Scouting, as a resource to help you do that. You probably have lots of questions. That's what we're here for. We're here to help answer those questions, help get you plugged into your local Boy Scout or Girl Scout council, and help get you started. So the fall of any year is a great time to do that. And we're coming up on the fall here. So if you're interested in that, definitely would like to make ourselves available for that. Maybe number 2, if somebody is interested in getting involved at the conference level, we'd love to have you. We'd love to have you join our committee. We're always looking for Methodist scouters who believe in that scouting as a ministry and have experience with it. Maybe somebody who's been a COR, short organization representative, or a scoutmaster, or a committee chairman, or a cub master. So if you have any of that kind of experience and you sort of feel a calling to do more at a higher level, gosh, please get a hold of us. I'd love to talk with you about that.